What's up, y'all? Back again today. Today I want to talk about something I usually don't talk about. I want to talk about a book. Now, I know a lot of people read all the time. I know reading is very fundamental, as they say. But believe it or not, I actually don't read that much. Now, I research, I study. But as far as reading, as far as just reading for entertainment purposes or to pass the time, just reading novels and whatnot, literature, I don't necessarily do that. Now, I want to make a few points with that. It's funny, usually when I speak and usually when I converse with people, they end up asking me what school I go to or what school I've gone to or what books I've read. You know, understandably, but I just want to let it be known that you don't have to read books to be considered smart, to be considered educated, to be considered intelligent, you know, right, or wise or any of that. You don't have to read books. You don't have to read books because books are another person's account of existence, right? Of what they've experienced. Not in all cases. Many books are purely historical documentation, purely scientific or purely mathematical, but even in that we have to understand that a lot of books say they're historical, say this book is historical, but it was only written by the conqueror. So you can't even take certain books for full face value. This is why I'd rather experience life and I'd rather take the basic functions of things, the basic mathematics of things, and come to my own conclusions. I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is it is important, however, to read some books sometimes. Particularly, I read the dictionary quite often, or I browse the dictionary whenever I come across a word that is unfamiliar to me or I want to make sure that I'm using correctly. I'll read the dictionary, right? But the one novel that has always stuck out to me and that I've always had a fascination with and then I read at a younger age was called George Orwell's 1984. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this book. Some of you haven't. Some of you've read it. Some of you haven't. I read this book when I was in the 9th grade as a part of a English class. So I had to read this book. I was tested on it. I had to answer questions about it. And when I was taught this, I started reading the book. I went and bought it. You can buy it too. I suggest you buy this book. I read the book, George Orwell's 1984, and I was the only one in the class. Now, mind you, in school, I was not into academia, like, at all. Like, I was a C student at best, right? C student. When I read this book, but the only class that I've ever did good in school was English, believe it or not. So, take it for what you will. When I had this test on this book, or the task to read the book, I was so interested that I stayed up all night, all day, reading the book, every day, until I finished it in like 3-4 days. Not even, finished it very quickly. When we were tested on the book, I was the only one with the highest score, and everybody in my class, all my friends, cheated off of me for the test because they didn't care about the book. But for some reason, I was 14 years old, and this book really sparked something in me. And so I did really good in the book, and I would tell all my friends, you need to read this book. Look, it's so interesting. So let me just tell you a little bit about the book. If you haven't read the book, there's maybe a couple spoiler alerts in here, but so be it. The book is called George Orwell's 1984. It's written by a man named George Orwell. And believe it or not, it was written decades before 1984. So this is a book that was considered to be a future utopia, a future event. It would be the equivalent of, in 2016, me writing a book called, say, 2068, the year 2068. And I'm supposedly envisioning a future for the inhabitants of 2068. And I'm writing a fictional book on that. That's what 1984 was. So I don't want to go over everything in the book because that's the point of reading the book. I can't make you grasp the complete concept of the book without you experiencing it for yourself. So I suggest you read the book. But I wanted to talk about a few quick things. There's a few correlations or similarities that I see between this book and real life, or actuality, reality. the reality that we're experiencing. The book is called 1984. In it, there's a main character called George Orwell. Oh, excuse me. George Orwell is the author. In the book, the main character's name is Winston. Now, Winston is a human being. Winston is not a part of any organization. Winston is an employee, a worker, a regular civilian. He has no ties to any elite organization. He has no reason to keep secret or to hold secrets, to give out misinformation or lies. In the reality that Winston lives in, however, he describes what many call Big Brother. He describes a government, a force of people that rule and dictate the happenings of everyone in the area. And this is dictated through what they call telescreens. Now, I have to intercede real quick. I have to let you know that telescreens was a word for cameras, okay? So mind you, this was written well before 1984. This was written before there were surveillance cameras on nearly every post on our street. This was written at a time where there were none, if not none, there were only very few cameras. So this was written at a time where surveillance was not a thing. However, in this time that it was written, it was said that we were going to live in a time where surveillance was the predominating force, was the dominating force in our society. So there had these things called telescreens that were on every post, on every house, right? And they could even see into your house. They had cameras that could see into your house, to see your daily activities, to see if you're doing the proper thing. And when I say proper, meaning if you're doing what the government and the elite officials would have you to do. So in the morning, they would wake up at a given time that was set by Big Brother, who again is the overseeing force, the government force. And this Big Brother would look directly into each household and know exactly who lived there, know them by name, know their occupation, know their history, criminal and otherwise, and they would speak directly to you. So if you could imagine being woken up by the government at 6 a.m. from a computer or a screen that is looking directly into your room, the dictator of this government is telling you specifically by name that you need to get up right now, start exercising, have this type of food. So this was the environment that they lived in. They were made to exercise. They were made to get up at the same time. They all had clothes that were in uniformity with each other. So they didn't have particular styles and fashions in Paris Fashion Week to where they can wear next year's fashion and retro fashion. They all had the same uniforms, whether they were at work or in their daily lives. They all had the same coffee, cereal, drinks, cigarettes. Every single commodity that you could think of was made by this Big Brother organization, was made by this overseeing force, and there was only one brand and only one kind. Now, mind you, Winston was very unique in the sense that he was not old, but he was an older gentleman that understood and remembered a time prior to Big Brother's existence. So he particularly remembered when they had different kind of cigarettes, when they were able to dress how they wanted. He understood a time and remembered a time where there were not screens on every single post telling them what to do. He understood and remembered a time before Big Brother, in other words. This is very important because this gave Winston the insight to understand that this was an unnatural happening. The idea or the fact of having such security or surveillance to where it was a dominating force, this was unnatural to Winston. So what he did, because again, we have to understand that the whole of society had fell under this spell or this belief that this was natural. To have government telling you how and when to do everything is natural. This is what the population believed. So when they believed this, that means that Winston was now the oddball out. This is why it's important not to call anyone crazy, because crazy connotates the idea basically that you are separate from everyone else, that you are somehow different than the norm. However, when the norm is considered crazy and you do separate from that, what are you? So this is what I mean. If everyone's doing something that you consider crazy and you're not the only one doing it, you may be considered crazy to them. It only means not normal. It only means not uniform. So again, this Winston character was in an environment where everyone around him was seemingly crazy. Everyone around him was seemingly accepting of this fact that they can be told what to do. And in conclusion, they were slaves. So what he did, as opposed to try to change this dichotomy, to try to change this turn of events, what he did was realize that, okay, I have to try to keep my sanity in this madness. Because again, he was an older gentleman, and the younger generation knew nothing of a time before Big Brother. There were people who only knew this Big Brother. There were people who only knew these telescreens and only knew one brand of cereal, only knew one type of clothes. But he, in his mind, he knew that this was a change and this wasn't normal. So he began a diary. He began to write a diary because, again, he didn't have his own camera. He didn't have a YouTube channel. He didn't have a legion of followings that he can speak this knowledge to. And, mind you, it was against the law to speak these type of things. In this book, there was even a thing called the thought police, to where if you think a certain thing, if you think in opposition to Big Brother, if you write in opposition to Big Brother, if you speak in opposition to Big Brother, or if you congregate with the means of disrupting Big Brother's plans, that was against the law, and you can be fined or locked up for that. And we'll speak about what we mean by locked up. So moving forward, Mr. Winston, under the understanding that he couldn't necessarily change the dichotomy of what's going on by himself, he took it upon himself to write a diary, or a log, a physical log of his history, of the current standings, so as to, if not anything, so as to keep his sanity, to keep a record of his sanity. So he began to write a diary of all the things he knew, of all the things he remembered, of all the things that he found that were wrong, but he could not speak them because, again, that was against the law. And with the thought police, they set it up. They set up the society to where your neighbor, even if you didn't work for the government, your neighbor will tell the government if you are, let's say, plotting against them, if you are thinking in opposition to what they're trying to indoctrinate you with. You would be told on by a number of people. So you began to run the risk of getting caught for even speaking the truth. This is, as you can see, there's a lot of correlations between this book and actuality. So moving forward, he wrote this diary in which every day he would write particular things, whether it was a specific dream, a specific memory of the past, a specific thing that his mother told him, or when he remembered a war that nobody else would speak of, he would write everything down. He got so paranoid that he wrote in this diary, and he hid the diary, and he made it so perfect that he would put like a little hair on the diary in a specific spot, so that if someone moved the diary, he would know, because he put it in a specific spot at a specific angle with one strand of little hair on it, to where nobody else knew. Nobody else could know to put it back exactly like that, right? So moving forward, he started logging in his diary, and this was him. His outward appearance was that of a regular civilian, but his inward emotions and his thought pattern was that of someone who could possibly rebel, because he understood that he was living in an unnatural state of events. At work, he found a woman who he was not only attracted to, but who he assumed and who he got context clues that this woman was similar to him in the stance that she understood that the environment they were living in was unnatural. So he found this woman who he finally realized, she's like me. She's just pretending to go along with the society, but she knows that it's wrong. So eventually, he started writing notes to her. Again, anything in opposition to the Big Brother motif was considered illegal. He began writing notes and passing notes along to this woman very discreetly. He would burn it, he would hide it, shred it, disrupt everything with the note after he was done. And very quietly, he slid it to her. So she read the note and she realized, wow, this man is just like me. So they began dating. They began quietly meeting up in discreet places, deep in the woods, where nobody would see, and they began having affairs. Well, should I say romantic affairs. They began to be romantic. They began to speak about their past. Now, mind you, all of this was illegal. Being naked and having sex, and all of this was illegal. They went into the woods to do that. And they went into old abandoned, what they thought to be old abandoned houses and storefronts to congregate and to do things that were illegal in the society. Moving forward, they told each other their secrets, and they confided in each other, and they trusted in each other. One day, it came to be that he ran across a group called the Brotherhood. Now, the Brotherhood is a very, very important entity because this was a group of quote-unquote revolutionaries that he ran into that were speaking the same things he was speaking. So he ran into a group of people who were speaking similar to him. They were speaking against Big Brother. They were speaking against the dictatorship that they were living in. They were speaking of a time before that they were living in this. So one of the main people in the Brotherhood was called Goldstein. In the midst of Winston having his affairs with his newfound girlfriend, he decided that it was about time for revolution. It was about time to meet up with like-minded individuals so that maybe we could change the reality. Now, without giving you every single specific, I want to move towards the end of the book. Towards the end, it's found out that, one, he met up with Winston and gave him all kind of information and told him, yes, I am in opposition to Big Brother, because he trusted Winston. So at the end of the book, we find out that, one, he gets caught. He gets captured. Okay? Winston gets captured as well as his girlfriend. They both get captured in one of the storefront abandoned houses that they would meet up at. And it turns out that every little infraction that Winston had made, going back to his diary, going back to the papers that he had written to the girl, every bit of information had been found and had been logged as evidence. So he thought that he was really being quiet and that he was gonna do something, but it turns out that they were watching him the whole time. The Big Brother motif was watching him the whole time. So they busted in, they captured him, they captured his girlfriend, they tortured him, they sent him to a prison with other individuals who had broken away from the Big Brother motif. They tortured Winston, they tortured his girlfriend, they made them give up all their secrets, right? And while in captivity, while in torture, Winston was so strong-minded that he would not give up. He would not betray his mind. He would not betray his girlfriend. But the thing that betrayed him was when Goldstein, the head of the Brotherhood or revolutionary organization that he trusted in, came in and revealed himself as an agent of misinformation. So what does that mean? That means that the person who he was trusting in, the head revolutionary, was actually an agent of Big Brother and was logging information in opposition to him. So at the end, Winston is tortured and is dejected and depressed so much from the understanding and the revolution that he could not do anything because everyone was against him this whole time, that he gave up. He gave up all his knowledge. He betrayed his girlfriend. And at the end of the book, he accepted Big Brother. He accepted the idea of Big Brother. So, stepping away from the book, because again, I want you to read it, and I left out some vital points that would bring it all together for you on purpose. I left those out on purpose, but I need you to read this book and understand the general concept and why I bring this book up. This book, if you haven't noticed by now, has many correlations or consistencies or similarities with the life or the reality that we're living right now. We have cameras on every post, cameras on every street. We have cameras on our phones, cameras on our computers. We have cameras on our Xboxes, right? There are more cameras now every single day, right? So this means that at all times we are being monitored. We're also being censored. It's also being encouraged to limit our free speech. Our free thought patterns are being discouraged. Critical thinking is being discouraged. New words such as domestic terrorism and homegrown terror threats and extreme radicalism, these words are now being used to describe real people, real civilians that are not threatening but that are speaking real truth. These words are being used to describe people like me even. So why I bring this up is because my question to you is, how much more do we have to go through before we're living in a 1984 environment? Before I am the new Winston and my speech is then limited. Furthermore, I understand the fact that I'm running a risk by even opening this channel. I understood that the very first video I made. You know, I came into this knowledge, I started coming into this knowledge when I was maybe, well, now that I look at it, I guess from when I started reading this book. Because I accredit my awakening to when I was about 18. When I was about 18 is when I first started being really awakened. But now that I look at it, this book was the first actual quintessential step for me understanding the reality that we're living in now. So when I see certain things like a new camera on your Xbox and you can say, hey, Xbox, turn on. Okay, do you think it's ever turned off? Do you think that Xbox telescreen is ever really turned off? Furthermore, we know about Edward Snowden, right? Who basically supposedly was called a whistleblower and a treasonous liar for revealing the truth about our NSA and about our government and that they spy on us. He's considered a traitor now for giving that truth out. So now what I want to tell you and I want to pose to you is the idea that regardless of how our life ends, regardless of what our reality turns into, we can never be so dejected and depressed and lose our sanity to the point where we accept Big Brother. We can never accept it, okay? Now this is why I made my channel. I've told you before. I'm trying to recruit, yes, recruit. So if anyone's watching, yes, I am a recruiter. I'm trying to recruit people of truth. Courageous people and warriors of truth that will not bow down or submit to the enemy. Understanding the possibility that you can be tortured, right? You can be imprisoned. You can be belittled, right? You can be betrayed for being truthful. But I do not want myself or you to end how Winston ended. Because at the very end of the 1984 book, Winston admitted from his mouth and his heart that he loves Big Brother. Again, because he was so dejected and he had no one with him to stand in his truth, that he would rather submit to his enemy than be considered crazy or to be inconvenienced or to be tortured any longer. That's deep, people. That's very, very deep. And with that being said, of course I don't want to take too much of your time, but please be strong in these times because we are living in 1984. I don't care what the year is. This is 1984. I love y'all. Please be strong and vibrate higher.